Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little. I'm here today with another video for PokerNews.com. I want to thank you all for being here. This hand is from a 5,000 euro EPT main event I played recently. Action folds to me on the button, and I get 4-3 of clubs. Not the best hand in the world, but I will certainly raise to 500. And a tight aggressive kid who I don't know a whole lot about elects to call. I am off to a very good start in this tournament. I believe we started with 30,000 chips. And I'm up to 55,000. So it looks like 3 players going to go ahead of me. Flop comes ace, queen, 10. My opponent checks. I decide to bet 600, which is a relatively small bet. I think this is a flop where I want to bet a large portion of the time, mainly because I should have something on this board a lot, and my opponent really should not have much. So especially with a hand that's effectively at the bottom of my range, that does have some backdoor equity, I like a bet. If I had a hand like 7-6 of spades on this ace-queen 4 board with no spades, I should probably just check fold. It's perfectly fine to check behind and give up with the absolute worst hands in your range, because it's not like this board should completely miss my opponent every single time or anything like that. So I am fine with making a bet with this hand, because notice any 5, 2, or club gives us plenty of equity. A king or a jack could be reasonable bluff cards. So I'm okay with this bet. Turns to 9 of hearts. It's not really what I'm looking for. And my opponent checks. So now I have to ask, if I bet, which hands that my opponent's going to call with on the flop will he fold on the turn? Notice if he has a queen or a 10, it very likely contains some sort of a straight draw, like jack 10 or king queen or queen jack or queen 8. Something like that. So those hands are pretty unlikely to fold. If he did have jack 9 on the flop, he just improves to a pair and he won't fold. I don't see many people folding a random jack if they had a random jack, like, well, jack 8 made a straight, jack 7 doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't really see myself getting very many folds in this spot. If I feel like 3-barreling, I suppose this isn't the worst hand in the world to do it with, but I think I would just prefer to have King X or Jack X to continue double barreling and maybe triple barreling. So I think I should probably just give up here. But I decided to bet 1,800. And I understand why I did this. It's because I have effectively the absolute worst hand in my range. And it's never bad to bluff with the worst hands in your range, especially when the board could very easily change again on the river. Notice again, a king, a jack, even a queen, a 10, a 9, etc. could make my opponent make a big fold on the river. But I think this is a little bit too aggressive. I'm sure many of you watching this are thinking this is just absolutely ridiculous. I don't think it's absolutely ridiculous, but I really don't like this turn bet. If I make this turn bet, I am very confident I'm going to be firing on pretty much every river, because I do not think this bet on the turn is going to be immediately profitable. There are spots that come up, not very often, but occasionally, where you are making a turn bet, not because this turn bet by itself is profitable, but because the river bet will be very profitable. And if I can bet the turn and the river and get my opponent to fold out top pairs, well, then I think betting in this spot is perfectly fine. If I think he's going to call down with top pair every time, then I think this bet is lighting money on fire. So that is what happens. We burn a little bit of money on the turn to hopefully get a good bluff card on the river. This is a great bluff card. Our opponent checks, and I'm certainly going to go for it. Notice now the pot's 6,000. This is where it's really nice to have some idea of what your opponent is thinking. If your opponent will view this smallish bet, a half-pot bet, as obviously strong and like you're trying to get value, then this bet is by far the best bet, because it saves money whenever your opponent does happen to have 2-pair or set or straight that he's never going to fold to any reasonable bet. If you think that he is going to look at this 3,000 bet and think that if he's not really going to think so much about your range and just think, well, I'm getting good pot odds, I guess I have to call a top pair, well, then you definitely want to be betting bigger. I think in general in this spot, we probably need to bet a little bit larger, probably 4,000 or so. There certainly is some merit to making a gigantic bet of 10,000 to try to get our opponent off some hands like 2 pairs. The problem with that is that I don't really see a whole lot of bluffs I should have in this spot. Notice if I have an ace, I'm not going to try to run a bluff. I probably wouldn't bet a queen or a 10 2 times. I mean, what else could I really have? Just stone air, right? Obviously, I could have all the kings, so I'd like to be betting big in that spot with all my kings. The problem is it's kind of hard to come up with a lot of realistic bluffs besides exactly hands like I have. And more specifically, hands like 5-4 of hearts or 5-3 of hearts or 4-3 of hearts. Those hands would make a lot of sense. So those hands, perhaps betting big is ideal. But I think in the spot when I do bet, it's going to be very value heavy. And when you're betting on the river in a very value heavy manner, you typically want to be betting on the smaller side. When you're betting with primarily value hands, you want to bet small. When you're betting with a reasonable amount of bluffs, perhaps up to 50% bluffs, you want to be betting huge. And right here, I just don't see very many bluffs I can have, so I do like this small bet. And the opponent does fold, so that is very nice. It always feels dicey making this bet, and I don't really love this hand, but I think it's important to review the hands where you perhaps do not play them well. And I would say that most likely in this spot, I'm probably just supposed to check behind on the turn and give up. But if I do bet the turn, I certainly have to bet the river, and I'm glad to see that I did that. I assume I would have went ahead and gone for it even on a somewhat safe river, like a 6 of spades. But this is obviously a river that I just have to go for it on. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I actually recently came out with a push-fold application that is incredibly useful for playing at the table. If you want to check that out, I would love your feedback. I know that you all give me great feedback here in the comments. So if you want to give me some more feedback, check out the app. You can search for it on the iTunes or the Android App Store. It's called the Float the Turn Push Fold app. Float the Turn Push Fold app. Or you can go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/app and play around with it there. So take a look at that. Let me know what you think. We are working hard to improve it. We're coming out with a quiz feature very soon. And I hope you like it. It's completely free. And I made it all for you guys. So take a look at it. And I'll be back next week with another hand for pokernews.com.